The sun had barely climbed over the rooftops when the sound of heavy engines echoed across the parking lot of St. Mary's Hospital. A line of gleaming motorcycles stood parked in perfect formation, their chrome catching the early morning light like fire. Around them stood men, broad-shouldered, tattooed, and wrapped in black leather vests stitched with the infamous red and white insignia, Hell's Angels. They looked like a wall of steel and resolve, intimidating enough to make most people cross the street to avoid them. But amid this sea of hardened faces, a tiny figure trembled, a little girl in a pale blue dress, clutching a worn-out teddy bear to her chest. Her cheeks were streaked with tears as she looked up at the man kneeling in front of her, his beard streaked with gray, his arms covered in ink that told stories of battles long past. If you believe that kindness can be found in the most unexpected places, and that everyone deserves a second chance, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Because today's story might just change the way you see people forever. The man before the little girl was Rick "Bulldog" Lawson, the president of the local Hells Angels chapter. His crew had come to the hospital that morning to visit one of their brothers, injured in a road accident the night before. But as they arrived, a small voice had broken through the roar of engines and the chatter of the group, a voice trembling with desperation. "Please, those men won't let my mommy in the hospital." The child had stood there, barefoot on the hot asphalt, crying so hard her shoulders shook. Rick had turned around, his tough exterior masking the flicker of concern in his eyes. He crouched down, looking the little girl in the eye. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked softly, though his voice still carried the gravel of years spent shouting over engines. She sniffled and said, "Lily. My mommy's sick inside, and they said she can't come in 'cause she doesn't have money to pay first." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. Behind him, the bikers exchanged uneasy glances. They weren't strangers to hardship. Most of them had grown up fighting for every scrap of dignity life had denied them. Money, rules, systems, they'd all been on the losing end of that game once. Rick stood up slowly, scanning the hospital entrance. A few security guards lingered there, one of them looking nervous as the bikers shifted their weight. Without saying another word, Rick motioned to his crew. "Stay here," he growled, and started walking toward the glass doors, Lily's small hand now gripping his rough, calloused fingers. Every step he took made the security guards more anxious. They saw the patches, the leather, the tattoos, everything that screamed danger. But what they didn't see was the man beneath it all, the man who had once held his dying mother's hand in a charity ward because no hospital would take her without insurance. That wound never healed, and maybe, he thought, it never should. At the entrance, one of the guards stepped forward. "Sir, you can't bring her in here," he said, trying to sound firm. Rick's voice was low, but every word carried weight. "Her mother's in there, and I hear she's being kept from seeing her kid." "That true?" The guard hesitated. "Hospital policy, sir. Bills have to be settled," Rick cut him off. "Bills?" His voice grew louder, filling the air like thunder. "You're keeping a sick woman from her daughter because of bills?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment, everyone around could feel the tension thick enough to choke on. Behind them, the other bikers stood silent but ready. These men, often seen as outlaws, had their own code, loyalty, respect, family. And right now, that little girl was family. Rick turned to Lily and crouched again. "Your mommy's gonna see you, okay? You trust me?" She nodded, wiping her tears with her tiny hands. Then Rick pulled a thick wallet from his back pocket and peeled out several bills, more than most people made in a week. He shoved them into the guard's hand. "This covers whatever you need to let that woman get treated. Now open those doors." The guards hesitated, but something in his eyes told them not to argue. Within seconds, the automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Lily ran inside, her little shoes slapping against the tile floors as she cried out for her mother. Rick watched her disappear down the corridor, and for the first time in a long while, he felt something stir inside him, something like peace. The bikers stood silently behind him as the hospital staff peeked from the windows, whispering. To them, it was an unbelievable sight, men with faces like warriors, standing guard not for a fight, but for a child's right to see her mother. Minutes later, Lily returned, pulling her mother, a frail woman in a hospital gown, toward the doors. The woman's face was pale, her eyes rimmed red, but when she saw the men waiting outside, she froze. Then Lily pointed. "Mommy, that man helped us." Rick smiled faintly, scratching the back of his neck. "Ma'am, don't worry about the money. You just focus on getting better." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do this for us? You don't even know us." Rick looked at her for a moment before saying quietly, "Because once, someone didn't do it for me." The woman covered her mouth, sobbing silently. Rick turned away before she could thank him. He wasn't doing this for gratitude. He was doing it because maybe, just maybe, that little girl would grow up remembering that not all monsters wear leather, and not all angels have wings. As they mounted their bikes, engines rumbling like distant thunder, Lily ran up again and handed Rick her teddy bear. "He'll protect you like you protected me," she said shyly. Rick looked down at the toy, worn and frayed but full of meaning, and for a moment, he couldn't find words. He simply nodded, tucking the bear into his vest before roaring off with his crew, the sound of their engines fading into the morning air. Hours later, hospital staff would still be talking about what they'd witnessed. People would share the story online, posting pictures of the moment a group of dangerous men became heroes. And somewhere on a long stretch of highway, a rough old biker would glance down at a small teddy bear on his handlebars and smile, knowing he'd done one good thing that would outlive him. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe for more real stories that remind us of the good still left in the world. Speech balloon before you go, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Rick's place? Would you have stepped forward for that little girl? Because sometimes, the smallest act of courage can make the biggest difference, and even the roughest souls can have the kindest hearts.